Today we're getting through. We left off taking a little waltz through the astrological ages, and now we're getting into the magical ages, which deals with, I guess we'd have to say, the evolution or the development of human consciousness. And magical aeons are sort of the groundwork, the foundation of what humanity as a whole sees as objective reality for that period of time. And as humanity grows, develops, evolves, devolves, are just general agreed upon objective reality environments sort of grow. I mean, we think about all our whole life, including our forms of worship and our forms of magic, are more or less based on that foundation. So we expect the ages to change as our understanding of our environment grows. So we worship different gods when we think that the sun dies every day, and we worship different gods before we even put two and two together where babies came from, like that. Okay. So we're going to go. I said Crowley said that within human memory there were three such ages. The aeon of Isis, the aeon of Osiris, and the aeon of Horus, which is the present one. And he also he also said that the age to follow, the aeon to follow, will be that of Frumacus or Mot. And these are just for convenience sake are given Egyptian god names and attributes because they're so conveniently universal. We could call them anything you want, really. But the Aeon of Isis, the formula of the great goddess. It's impossible for us to pinpoint the dawn of the Aeon of Isis. As we learned in our discussion of the astrological ages, evidence of the worship of the great goddess is found as far back as the age of Leo. And let me find that age of Leo for you so I can give you the date. Hang on, there's the age of 10,996 BC to 8,830 BC. In this period, when humanity was struggling with the first attempt at social intercourse, the most awesome mystery to excite the imagination was the power of woman. More than any other observable phenomena, woman was the most godlike. Each month, coinciding with the rhythmic cycles of the moon, she issued blood. Yet miraculously, she did not die, or very often, until the end. When the cycle of bleeding stopped, her body changed. Her breasts and belly swelled for 9 moons until she burst with water and new life. Because the earliest Icean age Urs were as yet unaware of the cause and effect relationship between sex and birth. It appeared that woman alone was the source of human life. Her life-giving powers were not limited to blood and birth, for from her breasts flowed milk, rich white blood, to nourish and sustain the new life she created. Woman was the human embodiment of the earth itself, which appeared to spontaneously bring forth the vegetation, along with the vegetarians and vegans, the earth which appeared to spontaneously bring forth the vegetation and animals needed to sustain the race. It was the most self-evident fact of life. Earth was mother, mother was life. God was woman. To be in harmony with the formula of the great goddess was profoundly simple. And as long as it was universally perceived that life and nourishment came directly from earth and from woman, all successful endeavors, magical practices, and religious expression did her homage. This perceived reality was deeply impressed upon our ancestors' minds. And long after they solved the mystery of where babies came from, they clung tenaciously to the outward forms of goddess worship and based all social and religious institutions on her formula. Eventually, however, our understanding of the universe around us grew, and we were confronted with a more complicated worldview and new unsettling mysteries. May I have some coffee, please? Oh, God, that's good. Oh. Okay. Moving ahead now to the Aeon of Osiris, the formula of the dying god. Now, even though the formula of the dying god became crystallized in the religions and institutions of the astrological age of Pisces, the Aeon of Osiris dawned much earlier. The advent of agricultural societies necessitated a greater awareness of the cycles of the seasons. Osirian age farmers began to recognize the effects of sunlight, or lack of it, had upon vegetation. They observed that at certain times of the year the days grew short and crops did not grow. It eventually became evident that even though the earth brought forth life, the supreme creative energy that vivified that life came from the sun. Coincidental with this discovery was the universal acknowledgement of the vital role men played in the procreative process. Just as plant life needed the warm, penetrating rays of the sunlight to flourish, so too woman needed the introduction of the male sperm to avoid being forever barren. The heretofore unrecognized concept of fatherhood became the dominant theme. The Aeon of Osiris truly began when our forebears raised their eyes to heaven and woke up to the fact that life on earth was a partnership of sun and earth. And the life of the race was a partnership of man and woman. However, the partnership was not perceived as being equal. And as we learned from our discussion of the astrological age of Taurus, the male backlash was severe and unmerciful. Deity was now male, a father, and his power was likened to that of the sun. Even though this shift of consciousness was a result of a more accurate assessment of the facts of life than was realized in the Aeon of Isis, it was not quite accurate enough. A defect in the perception of cosmological facts plunged our Osirian age ancestors into a dark and terrifying insecurity crisis that traumatized the human race so severely that we're still suffering its effects. This fundamental flaw in understanding caused us to switch our focus from the mysteries of where life comes from to an obsessive preoccupation with death. The tragic misunderstanding focused on the belief that each day the sun was born at dawn in the east and died in the evening in the west. Speculations abounded about where the dead sun went during the darkness of night, and if indeed a new one would ever appear again in the east. Perhaps it went to the land of the dead, where we temporarily visit during our nightly little death of sleep. The terrors and ecstasies of our dreams form the archetypes of heaven and hell. And after we die, who better to judge our worthiness for either place than the dead sun, who created and sustained us during our stay on earth? This is precisely the part the god Osiris would play in Egyptian mythology and Christ's role in Christianity. To further complicate these fears, the sun's yearly escapades caused an even greater anxiety. Each year, at the zenith of the sun's power in summer, it was observed that each day it rose, it set a little south of where it did the day before. Around harvest time, the days grew noticeably shorter, and the specter of the empty harvested fields accentuated the leafless trees and browning grasses and painted a melancholy and frightening portrait of nature in articulo mortis. I talk like that all the time. Presumptuous, pompous and presumptuous affectations. Don't I talk like that all the time, don't I, dear? Never mind. Yes, I was just yelling at you. No, I'll tell you later. It was unsettling enough to have the sun completely disappear every day, but if it continued to head south until night was perpetual, how long could the world survive in the cold darkness before a new sun appears? In an attempt to calm the shattered nerves caused by such musings, a few wise souls took a deep breath and attempted to look at the big picture. Yes, the sun dies every evening in the west, but years of observation and the testimony of the oldest members of society indicated that no one could remember a time when another one didn't come up in the east within a relatively short time. Yes, the sun becomes weak and almost dies each year, but the same observations and testimony revealed that it eventually reverses its journey south and the days grow longer until again a new cycle of life returns to the earth. Based on the best information at their disposal, they concluded that magical power, an unknown and supernatural force, was responsible for the sun's resurrection. They further surmised that the secret of this magic must be hidden in the very nature of the sun. And if they could only harmonize with that nature, then perhaps they too could overcome death. Everywhere they looked in nature, they saw the sun cycle of birth, life, death, and resurrection reenacted. They observed the plants sprouted to the surface in the spring and grew tall and strong in the long days and warm sunlight of summer. Then in autumn, at the height of their maturity, they put forth seeds and then died or were cut down at harvest time. Like the earth itself, the seeds lay dead and buried throughout the lifeless winter, only to spring to life when the rains and the lengthening rays of the sun transformed the soil into a moist, warm womb. They also observed accelerated plant growth near the decaying remains of animals or people, and wherever large amounts of blood spilled on the ground. This wonder was the male solar counterpart of the female lunar mystery of menstruation. The parallels between sun and phallus, sunlight and semen, the fertilizing power of semen had upon the woman and that blood had upon the earth did not escape our Osirian ancestors' fertile imaginations. A new fact of life, one that conformed to the secret nature of the sun, became the magical formula of the aeon. Life comes from death. In order to harmonize with the new formula, it would become necessary to take an active role in the great death-life drama. For the earliest members of the Aeon of Osiris, human sacrifice was the supreme pantomime of the sun's daily and yearly sacrifice to the earth. It also illustrated the sacrifice of the potency of the phallus after ejaculation, and the seed's sacrificial death, burial, and resurrection. The spilling of human blood in the unsown or newly planted fields resulted in a noticeable increase in the fecundity of the harvest. The most comforting benefit derived from such bloody forms of religious expression was the undeniable fact that as long as they continued to sacrifice, the sun always came up in the morning and always stopped its journey south and returned to bring spring and summer. See, as long as we keep doing this, the sun keeps coming up. Let's not mess with the good thing. This put a tremendous amount of power in the hands of the priests or priestesses who wielded the sacrificial knife. They positioned themselves between the people and the gods and implied personal responsibility for the rebirth of the sun. With each dawn, they became demonstrably more powerful. At regular intervals, all over the world, the ceremonial slaughter of the divine king assured the bountiful harvest and the well-being of the people. Even though the future victim was titular head of state, he was not a ruler in the modern sense. He was the living embodiment of the sun, and therefore supreme monarch of the earth. His periodic murder and coronation of his successor were occasions of great solemnity. In the waning years of the Aeon of Osiris, the character of the sacrifice evolved from human blood to animal blood to bread and wine. Among the more mystically inclined, the sacrifice became a personal and transcendent experience. Nevertheless, such changes did nothing to disturb the basic magical formula of the Aeon of Osiris. The cycle of birth, life, death, and resurrection remained the dominant theme right up to the time of the magical revival of the late 19th century. By this time, however, the old formula was no longer based on misinformation. It was built on denial. Okay, that's where I'm going to stop today, and tomorrow we'll dedicate tomorrow to the Aeon of Horus. Join me in a sip of coffee. Okay, I got a lot of stuff to do today, including a tarot reading or two. Continue to be good to yourself and be good to each other. Enjoy what's left of the Olympics. I know some of you will be watching the Super Bowl. We're not big fans. Last year, we consulted the oracular chicken, who picked the correct winner of the Super Bowl. I've been trying to contact the oracular chicken. Constance says she doesn't exist. Don't tell us that. It's like Santa. Okay. Continue to be good to yourself, be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will.